So here's a more recent thing actually. We took another step on the same topic, something called laser stacker. And this actually, we presented this at the WIS conference like 3 months ago. And the interesting thing here is, let me show this again. So this is my student Ludwig coming in, and he does not have a single sheet of acrylic, he has 3 sheets of acrylic. In his hand there's 3 sheets of acrylic, and he puts them in all at the same time. Okay, here are the 3 sheets. Does a good job of showing this to the camera. And he's going to make a pair of scissors now, and the pair of scissors will be welded in the laser cutter. So when they come out, they're actually already assembled. And so it's a really interesting design if you think about it. These are the 2 handles of the scissors. Let me actually just pause here and tell you how this works. So the system does 3 types of interaction. The first thing it does is you can cut through things, obviously. The second thing you can do is you can cut partially into a layer. And when you cut partially into a layer, what happens? Some of the material evaporates locally and starts to condensate around it and glues the material together with other things. That's how the welding works. So that by itself was not all that useful. We also found a way how to release welds. So we found if we cut a little bit next to that, and obviously lots of details in the paper, we could remove some of these, we could heal some of the things we had done. And I think this was what I really enjoyed the most was if you have in the material you have a cut and you make another cut not all the way through right next to it, the material actually bends over a little bit into the cut, and we could weld it back together with the material. So we found a way actually of healing these cuts. And so by cutting, welding, and healing cuts and healing welds, we were able to make these things. Okay, so here's the software package we wrote. I think I stopped the video too early. You didn't see how the scissors actually work. So these actually cut paper. So we wrote, again, with the SketchUp extension in this case, we can go in and model these scissors. You didn't see the punchline. You didn't see how the scissors actually cut. So, and then you can drag in different types of components where we help you in making these things more efficient. Yeah, I'll stop here. All right. So we were at a level now where we could interact with things pretty quickly because we interact with them on a per element basis and also known as interactive fabrication. So, okay, these were the key things, but we wanted to push it one further, and we were wondering what could it be like to interact in real time. And so, could we interact 30 times a second with a fabrication machine? What would that be like? It was a thought experiment. So, if you will, we started with batch processing, we made it to kind of command lines. What would it be like if we actually had direct manipulation? And, okay, so think of this as an art project. We're actually going to show this at the upcoming Kai conference, but this is a little different from the previous ones. And I hope you're going to like it. So here's what happens. 2 people actually, there's 2 players, this is a game. 2 people put a €5 bill in there, that's 5,000, 6,000 won. You can also put in 10,000 won if you like to, or 50,000. And what happens now is, we'll give you an iPhone, you shake it as hard as you can. Do we need sound? Let's see if we have sound. So what happens here is, the harder you shake, the laser actually goes through the 2 money bills, and the harder you shake, the more you push the laser into the money bill of the other person. Okay? So your job is to destroy the money of the other person. And this is us that she's a terrible person to lose against. So we did this on this laser cutter. This one actually is a Chinese fabrication. Alex is actually he's Korean actually. This is Jae-yoon, he's also on my team. And you can see how he didn't quite believe initially that his money would really be destroyed. And anyways, there you go. So we destroyed money in the process. So that was our attempt to just, maybe from an artsy perspective, think about what would it be like if you really directly interacted at full rates with these things. All right. So what I just showed you, we didn't make anything faster. We just interacted at higher rates. So these things on top, what really happened was there was a separate axis. These were indeed kind of faster, but we also just interacted with smaller and smaller components. Like rather than interacting with a complete 3D print, we started to interact with like features of it, or like just these tiny features in the case of the destructive gains. But at some point in the future, this will all get substantially faster. And you've already seen things like Carbon 3D and these things that are actually really fast. So what it's going to be like, and I think in the future we will have things that fabricate 30 times a second. So maybe we can just get like some sort of animation of by quickly making and destroying things. And that obviously is a zoescope. So this is not a fast fabrication tool, it's just an idea. But if we could make these things, we could actually start interacting with physical matter the same way we interact with VR right now. If you think of movies like Iron Man, he has this thing where he reaches into this, his robotic suit somehow in VR. But in the future, these things will happen when you actually reach into physical matter. So we're not the first people to dream this dream. This dream has been done by a lot of people. Here's, for example, we've shaped displays from Hiroshi Ishii's lab. It's kind of a bit like that, right? You have something that changes physical shape quickly. And I'm sure you've all seen this. The dream itself is actually way older than that. People like in modular robotics in the 80s, there was a lot of work at Xerox PARC as well, looked into these things. Today that's called smart matter. People are trying to make matter arrange itself. And here's an envisionment from a smart matter company. I don't know when you can buy the product, but here's kind of the idea of what it could be like. You could be in a meeting, it could be like a car. You could adjust it in real time and it would be physically tangible. It's not like a computer graphics model. So I don't know. I'm wondering if Fab can get there faster than smart matter. Here's just something we're working on. This is a student Anna here. This is actually a video from, this is not published yet. You're the first people to see this outside the lab. This is something we're working on right now. The video was taken 2 days before I took off on the plane. But you can see as something's happening. So we have a robotic arm, there's a heat gun on it, and the heat gun just heated this thing up, and now Anna can actually pull out the material. So you should be looking here right now. So she wears markers for like a motion capture system, and now she can pull out interactively the material. So we want to continue this, we want to make a whole sculpting system out of this, that you can like say, this cross section you want to pull out here, and then the robot arm is going to go around and heat these things up. And we hope they're going to get like some interactive sculpting system out of this. So don't tell anyone, this is not published yet. There you go. Alright, so this is what we have done on interactivity. I think interactivity will play a big role because it's kind of similar to the questions we had in interactive computing. And I think I'll use the remaining time to tell you more about sustainability and intellectual property. So, if you believe what I said in the beginning, then fabrication will be big, lots of people will be doing these things quickly, iterating a lot, and a lot of trash will be produced. And I think one of the things, would be great if, before we screw things up too badly, if we start thinking about the consequences of what we're doing, just for once, if we started thinking about these things early. So, there's almost no research at this point here, so if anyone is interested in a good research question, here's something, there's lots of stuff to do here. And, since like half of your students, maybe this is something that you want to tackle. It's also a good thing to do. It's good for the planet, good for us. So I got really inspired by this work here. This is work from Ted Selker and folks from Kai 2005. So this is like 10 years old. They made a machine that made dishes on demand. And they also thought about recycling a little bit, but this actually made me think in some direction. Like at some point in the future, maybe we're going to be in this all-trash society where like if you need something, you're just going to make it and then you dispose of it really quickly. And I think this could create massive issues somehow. So people in the community have started to look at these things. In part, the maker movement looked at filament recycling. So if you have like a maker board or something like this, and you've 3D printed something, you can actually chop this up again and get filament back out of this. This works like 5 or 6 times. I think that's a step in the right direction. Maybe one detail. Some companies are working on multi-material printing. That's actually kind of an issue, the same way that you have composite materials today in milk, cartons and so on. They're very hard to recycle. Here's just a little bit of work that is also unpublished work together with my student Alex, where we're looking at metamaterials. So these pliers actually perform as if they consist of multiple materials, but it's actually just a single part of material. So let me show you how to pick up the screw here with these pliers. So I don't know if you look at them, do you understand how they work? So there's no joint here really. It's a very interesting type of plier. So it's all about this thing in the middle here. All the cells are stiff, so they're rigid. And then these cells in the middle here allow the system to kind of skew, and that's how you can pick things up. Here's another example. That's like a simple door latch. And all the mechanical functionality is all just made from a single material. Some of the components are soft, some of the materials perform as if they were hard, but it actually is all the same material. So here's a rotary joint, there's another sliding component up there. Everything is made from the same material, just by rearranging the material in an appropriate way. All right, so here's another idea. Maybe instead of making so much stuff, maybe we can just make less stuff in the beginning. And so Here's something we can think about called patching. So today, I think whenever something goes wrong, we instantly make a whole new object, and that feels inherently wrong. If something is, maybe you printed something and the 3D print didn't come out that way, maybe it failed somewhere, we throw this away and we start a new print. And so what we did here is we added the milling machine in, and what you can do is you can actually take an object you've already fabricated and put it back into the machine, and it will grind down the things that you're dissatisfied with, and it's going to replace those. So these two things actually have the same body here, and we put it back in and replace certain things. You can think of, in general, like the idea of repairing things, could be very powerful, right? We've repaired lots of things over the years. Maybe we should think of 3D printers not as machines for making stuff, but as machines for repairing things, and that could go a long way and reduce the material consumption quite considerably. So here's the last thing on that line of things I want to show you, called bottle print, actually. It's also not published yet. So here we're thinking about, well, I think you can figure it out. So this is also a 3D printing system, but most of the things that come out are not 3D print, but they're bottles. So here we're going to make a chair. It's a very simple, I think actually very beautiful chair. It consists of an octahedron as the base, and then there's two tetrahedron in the back that actually allow for creating backrest. And so in Germany, this is like recycling of bottles is big, and returning them, deposit bottles is also big. So the only thing that's 3D printed actually is connectors in the middle here, and everything else is made from bottles. Right, I have a video of this in a second. Maybe I should show it. The project was indeed in part sponsored by Coca-Cola. They gave us only 200 bottles, so I don't know. I think they have more. Look at Dora's face. That's the first time he assembled one. He's like, oh wow, is this really holding up? I don't know. But it's holding up pretty well, actually. So we push this further. Here's a simple truss structure. And we actually get reasonable structural stability out of this thing. Alex is a light person, though, I have to say. And he would try to make this bigger by including laser cut parts as well. And so here's like a tent. So here, full furniture. Here's Ludwig's pet dog. Here's the table and two chairs. We get too attached to physical objects in my lab. So we should get a real dog, I guess. So it's just modeling this. Oh, I didn't bring the piece of video. There's another piece of video where Rob made one. He made a little boat, and I bet money on the fact that it would sink, but it did work. So they actually took it out to the little pond outside the lab. All right, so here's the challenge I have for you guys. So these are, I think, some of the easier things to do. I think the harder issue is actually this one here. If you believe my analogy that 3D fabrication will have some analogies to computing, this is, I think, part of the real problem of computing. It's not necessarily the electricity that you consume, it's the number of machines that are actually thrown away that way. Mobile phones today certainly count in that space as well. I don't know, maybe you get a new phone every year, every 2 years, something like that. So a lot of trash is actually produced that way. And I think what we're going to see in 3D printing and related fields is we're going to have some sort of a Moore's law where things will very quickly produce better ways of doing it. And I think many of these 3D printers will not have used up their own weight in materials. They were just like, you're going to print 10 things with them, and then you're going to buy a new machine. And I think what we're going to have are these big trash heaps of just fabrication machines. So it's an interesting question, how can we address that? People have looked for computing. There was this idea of modularity, that you would actually keep the casing and so on, but I don't recall it ever really working out. So if you have some clever ideas here, let me know how this goes. All right, and the last block I have for you is to look at intellectual property. And so I had this really terrible situation. My aunt, she's 83, she asked me, what is digital? I rambled around for 45 minutes. I certainly did not know what digital was at the time, which was bad because I had to teach an introduction to programming class, and it's a good idea to know what digital is if you do that. But after I thought about this, I went home and did some research, and I think this is what digital is. Digital means if you're making a digital copy of something, like in the case of a CD, it's not just about the copy you made, it's the fact, as I said at the beginning, that in the process there's this computer copy being made, this kind of digital representation that can actually go somewhere. And making one digital copy is the same as making a million digital copies, because you can stick this onto BitTorrent or any other shared repository, and you can create a lot of different things. And that's actually the reason why we have lots of issues nowadays. So here's the same situation. We're going to see that with 3D models as well, just the same way. You know, as you 3D scan something, in the process you're going to produce like a 3D object. And the question is, well, what's the nature of that object? What's going to happen to that? And I think it's the same thing. Once you have that, it's going to make millions of copies. And designed once, shared a million times. So the need for creating things will be reduced because things that once were made were actually then shared by lots of millions of people. So just as a thought experiment, if you buy like an iPad stand, I guess here that would be a Galaxy Tab stand. Maybe you're paying $10 for it. Maybe you're paying 6,000 won for it. I'm sorry, is that true? No. All right. So the amount of material you need to print it is much smaller. And there must be some design in there. And that's an interesting challenge because if you share this model right now, the designer actually doesn't get the $7 for designing this thing because it's now being shared the same way we share music. It's a very interesting analogy. So when I was a kid, I was born in the late 60s. I was a kid in the 70s. And at the time, if you had an album, if you had like a record, that means you owned the music. And if you didn't have the record, then you didn't have the music. And you didn't own it either. Right? There was a very clear analogy between owning the artifact and owning the contents. Now, this changed. People started, they recorded onto tape at the time. And this was illegal in the beginning. You were not allowed to record from the radio when I was a kid. Until the German super evil intellectual property society, they actually ended up getting 20 cents for every blank tape, and then it was legal again. So similar things for MP3s have not worked out, obviously, and so, if you maybe as kids or today, if you're sharing music in massive amounts, you don't enjoy what I had, which is when I was a kid, I was not illegal. You probably all are, right? Because you've shared music with someone at some point. So we're going to have the same issues with sharing material. So what happens in Germany is this: you get like a cease and desist order. It says you downloaded music or you shared this, you shared this movie online, and now we want like thousands of dollars from it. And I think these things will soon go out for people who actually do this with physical matter. There's actually a sharing site at this point already where people can stream contents to the 3D printer, but they can't download it to make sure you can produce it only exactly once and not multiple times. So the last project I want to show is this one. It's all artsy perspective on the question of, of this. So we thought about teleportation, and it turns out there's two definitions of teleportation. Number one is objects travel in their original form through a distorted time-space continuum, like a wormhole. We couldn't implement that. We didn't figure out how to do that. And the second one is what we thought was quite feasible. Objects are disassembled in one location, information about their structure is transmitted, and objects are reassembled from different matter in a remote location. And it's known as beaming, okay, if you're like into that type of sci-fi. So here's our project called Scotty, vaguely named after a TV show from the 60s, I guess. So this is my student Johannes. He's actually created a necklace pendant for his friend Julia, and he puts this into one of the units. He says, send to Julia, and he's going to send this to Julia. And he's not going to send a copy to Julia, he's going to teleport the object, if you will, arguably. Right? So what's happening is, inside we have a milling machine, and the milling machine chops off one layer of the object, takes a photograph, chops off another layer, takes another photograph. So it is scanning the object, but it's destroying the object at the same time. So there's always a process of milling and a process of 3D printing. And 90 minutes later, the object is gone, has been evaporated. But there's a digital copy that was encoded to only be printable on the other unit. So obviously Julia is supposed to be like thousands of miles away. And out of her machine comes the necklace pendant that Johannes has designed for her. And it's the only copy around at this point. So take this with a grain of salt. We think of this maybe not quite all that seriously, but this is an interesting question. I mean, today you can buy things from eBay, and you can buy them really quickly, right? One-click shopping, it's like you have it. You pay using PayPal, it's like, and then you wait a week until the object reaches you. I think this could be one way in the future how people actually, also receive the object very quickly, because the object, without violating copyright, because the object actually was destroyed in the process. All right, so we just zoom out for you to kind of sum this up. I think in the future we're going to have, you know, if you believe my analogy between personal fabrication and PCs, you know, every 18 months we're going to have new machines, the same way we have every 18 months something in Moore's Law gets better. You know, we're going to have, the same way we have double storage and so on, double processing every 18 months, we're going to have double resolution and higher print speeds and so on. You know, it's the same way that compilers we already have fab machines that make more fab machines, so they're self-replicating to speed things up. We're going to produce objects of unimaginable complexity. This is a paper model here, but some people are debating how this could go. A friend of mine is working on 3D printing motors right now. I think that's very interesting. There's a lot of work on 3D printing electronics already. So you can envision that you're going to get complete machines out of a 3D printer that's not just mechanical, but actually contains electronics and so on in the device. If you believe my analogy earlier, then I think we're going to transition away from the punch card model we have right now towards a future where we're going to interact with these things in kind of the same way that we're familiar with from our tablets and phones. The process itself hopefully will change as a result. And the main cost, as in all these industries, would shift from hardware initially to software, to training, to maintenance. That's just how these fields go. So in the future, the question is not like how much money does it cost to buy a 3D printer, but the question is how to kind of, make sure people learn how to use it properly, and then ultimately how to maintain them. We're going to sue each other, right? One of you is going to make this wonderful thing, and you're going to sue everyone else in the world for having made that object because you're going to steal that object. And new companies will emerge as well. So there's a, right now Apple company is big, but maybe in the future like Thingiverse will be big, or maybe your startup will be big because you are one of the companies who actually initially capitalized on this thing. I think Autodesk has a good chance of being big right now in that space. I think the grand challenge is to let everyone solve mechanical problems, so we shouldn't limit ourselves to just having, shape, little things to, beautiful things to look at, like little scans of ourselves, but we should really help people make things that are worth making. Maybe altogether we can solve harder problems, right? So the number of people working in space elevators today is very small, but if a couple of million people pool their ideas, maybe we can get some. All right, and I think these are some problems. If you're a student looking for interesting things to do, I think there's lots of things to do. And I think this is kind of, when you think back of like Dr. Engelbart, he thought of the PC as being a machine that helps us be smart. And I think in the future, places to be smart may actually look more like this, right? Being smart with a computer might actually include physical matter, like near local fun. Okay, so I showed off with a lot of work that I really like, but actually I have to give credit to these people behind me. These are like my students in my lab. And with that, I'm happy to take your questions. So Steve got 3 questions yesterday. If you can give me 4, that would give me an edge on Steve. I would like that. 5 would be too much. I mean, I would go crazy if you asked me 5 questions.
Yeah. I have a very simple question. We use products under the assumption that the companies that made them made correctly or safely. And the companies are under the regulation of governments, and they hire experts, something like that. But if products are made by ordinary persons, what would happen?
I don't know. I'm probably the worst person to ask. We have all this equipment that is insanely dangerous. And when the students come up to me and say, like, is this dangerous? I say, don't worry, we're going to get new students next year. So if you get hurt, it'll be okay. I think this would go in the same as the IP question, right? I think ultimately a lot of lawyers could come in this space. I think you're right. I think computing equipment is pretty safe to sell, right? It's very difficult to hurt yourself with a computer, at least not in an immediate way. You can hurt yourself by getting a strain injury or something like this. Honestly, I'd never thought about this, but I think they have a point. I think there's a good chance that people at home will actually have reasonably dangerous equipment. At the same time, I think you will see the equipment itself changing. So I mentioned Hewlett-Packard earlier, who I met with like 4 weeks ago, and they're making an inkjet 3D printer right now. And so maybe you own an inkjet printer at home. It's just for regular ink. And the same technology actually can be used for 3D printing. They say they can make 23 million voxels per second with this stuff. And these things seem reasonably safe, so I kind of would hope that a lot of the, maybe what I said about domain knowledge, maybe the same way that we put in domain knowledge that help you be smart, maybe we also start putting domain knowledge and help you be safe. And I apologize for not having those in the slides, but that's a really good thing to research. I really like this. It'd be good if someone actually, became creative around this, thinking about safety in these systems. Laser cutters, a little bit more dangerous, arguably, and then milling machines probably take the cake. I mean, they indeed are dangerous, I think. Laser cutters probably not so much. 3D printers. All right. Get me 33% closer to Steve. Ask a question.
네, 또 질문이 있으신 분은 손을 들어 표해 주시면 저희가 마이크를 갖다 드리도록 하겠습니다. 네, 저기 마이크 좀 갖다 주십시오. 마이크. 어느 분?
Are you a student?
Hello. Thank you for the wonderful lecture, and I have a few questions. To make a real product, I think the biggest problem is the resolution of the materials and things like that, like the joints to make. For example, if I try to make a copy of iPhone, you have to make joints of glass and aluminum, things like that. But I think the resolution of the 3D printing is not really detailed yet. So, how would you explain about the future of the resolution of 3D printing stuff?
Yeah, so I thought the same thing, but I think what you're referring to is mostly in the consumer, the maker space right now. This is a machine from Object that makes 1600 dpi. That's a lot of voxels. 1600 is insane, right? So in printing, we stop caring about resolution when we reach 600 dpi, because that's what you and I can kind of resolve. And 1600 dpi is a lot of, that means like when your fingers go over it, you may not necessarily feel like a structure anymore, just barely actually. So I don't think that 3D printing will be limited quite in this way. I think the bigger problem is that these machines are insanely slow at the same time. So if you go up in the resolution, it takes longer to produce those. So I think some of the evolutions that we're going to see though to increase resolution is closed loop printing. So that means today, I'm actually amazed that these printers work without any back channel. They're just printing, and at the end, in most cases, not always, a 3D object comes out. In the future, we're going to see, and I've seen prototypes of that have a built-in camera. So as they're printing, they're observing the part that's being printed. And by doing that, they can actually say, oh, this is already high enough. I expected to print another layer, but it turns out this material is already high, we're talking microns, right, tiny. It's already high enough, I'm not going to print it, I'm going to skip that layer. And I think ultimately that's going to give us another boost in terms of resolution, closed loop printing. It's also going to mean that more objects will work out. And as I said, I'm completely dumbfounded by the fact that today's process of just printing is working. I mean, these machines produce, millions of voxels, and every single voxel has enough reliability that the whole thing kind of typically works out. In the future, I mean, it's a dumb way of doing it, right? In the future, I think, these machines will monitor what they're doing, and this will, I don't know how much of an improvement we're going to get out of this. We're going to see. So I don't think that. So what I was talking about earlier, like metamaterials, briefly, right? I think they will have a need for much higher resolution, actually. So I think for just consumer objects, grips, handles, whatever, normal machines, I think the resolution we have right now is plenty. If you're trying to make microscopic structure that actually implements material properties, I think we can probably use another, factor of 4 or something like this. I was wondering, are you a student? I'm right. No, I can't see. You're not a student. Because I wanted to get a question from a student over Steve, and you tell Steve afterwards. No, you're not a student. I want a student question.
네, 그 시간 관계상 마지막 질문을 좀 받아야 될 것 같아서 질문이 많겠지만.
Hi, I'm Azim from Korea Institute of Science and Technology, and first of all, thanks for the nice talk. I have a question regarding the repairs of anything. Like, I think the 3D printing can have a big application in repairs, but the biggest problem is that we cannot fix the 3D print